There are many ways to mark the end of summer, which very many of us do not want to end. One of the delightful traditions in our community during the summer is that we get to hear from you, from our congregants, all throughout the summer through offerings of Divrei Torah, through teachings. And we've reached the last of those for this summer. We've reached a great one to be the last of the summer. And so it's a pleasure to invite forward Diane Frankle, who's been a member of Beth Am with her husband Bob since 1987. She's been active in Torah study, our Shema groups, and our Racial Justice and Equity Initiative. She and her husband have offered interfaith dialogue programs at Beth Am and recently launched a new Interfaith Bridges program through their nonprofit Building Bridges Together. And when you have a moment after services, please, I urge you to congratulate them because they've just returned from the wedding of their son. All right? Diane. Over here.
Shabbat Shalom. It's a privilege to speak with you tonight. As Rabbi said, my husband Bob and I first came to Beth Am in 1987 when I was pregnant with our first child, our son, Paul Frankle. Both our sons, Paul and Mark, the latter just got married, were B'nai Mitzvah and confirmed here at Congregation Beth Am. Bob and I became more active ourselves here as empty nesters, beginning with a wonderful trip to Israel in 2011 with a Beth Am group led by Rabbi Martyr, and 10 plus years now at weekly Shabbat services and Torah study. Bob and I offered our Building Bridges Interfaith Dialogue programs at Beth Am, and Beth Am is sponsoring our new Interfaith Bridges program with our nonprofit Building Bridges Together. You have warmly welcomed me into this community, although I remain a practicing Christian. I want to thank you all for offering me that sense of inclusion and belonging. I view this faith community as an important part of my life and my spiritual journey. I truly believe that I was standing with you as part of that mixed multitude at the foot of Sinai. It's a great honor to be here tonight. I want to share with you tonight about a small group discussion program called Facing Our Truths. Beth Am began this program this summer through Beth Am's Racial Equity and Justice Initiative, convened by Rabbi Sarah. The purpose of these small group discussions is to allow the Jewish community to consider how we face our truths about race, privilege, power, and the bias that we all hold. Beth Am offered 4 small groups this summer using this curriculum, each with about 6 to 10 people. I facilitated one of these groups. Our other facilitators this summer were Donovan Yisrael, Emily Nagankar, and Irene Lefton. How did I come to this work? In 2016, I joined the San Francisco Advisory Board of Facing History and Ourselves. The mission of this organization is to challenge students and teachers to use the lessons of history to confront bigotry and hate. I took a trip to Montgomery, Alabama in 2017 with Facing History leaders from across the organization. I was confronted with U.S. racial history, lynchings, mass terrorism against blacks, brutal violence against those who sought the vote. I began to educate myself about how racism has impacted our society. The more I learned, the harder it was to look away. One of the contributors to our Facing Our Truths curriculum observed, "We are taught to recognize racism only in individual acts of meanness and not invisible systems conferring unsought racial dominance on whites from birth. Over the past 3 years, I have co-chaired 2 groups, a DEI committee for our local Facing History advisory board, and a racial equity task force for the Board of Trustees of a small liberal arts college in Ohio. Each time with amazing Black women as my co-chairs. Through this work, I have come to recognize the consequence of the U.S.'s racial history in the form of ongoing systemic racism. The Facing Our Truths curriculum is a powerful set of materials that confronts us in a coherent and intentional way with the history and impact of racism in the United States. Of course, no 6-session course is going to finish this job, but the program is well structured to help us come to an understanding about how racism has infected and continues to impact our U.S. institutions and systems. The curriculum also offers perspectives from Jewish tradition and ethics to help put the history we are learning in perspective. Some have asked, why should Jews concern themselves with the ongoing impact of systemic racism in the face of rising anti-Semitism? White nationalism is on the rise here in the U.S., threatening not only Jews, but Blacks and Muslims and Hispanics. We need to be vigilant and protect ourselves and our community. And I also resonate with what Emily Nagankar said in her Devar Torah a few weeks ago. We all need to think not but, rather and. We can challenge anti-Semitism and we can challenge racism. We can be victims of anti-Semitism and we can benefit from white privilege, systemic racism, and hold social power to change the status quo. So this is not an either-or issue. We can be concerned with both anti-Semitism and racism. Our Torah portion for this week, Re'eh, suggests an important rationale for confronting racism. In this portion, Moses sets before the people of Israel a choice. Choose a blessing or a curse. If we follow the commands of Adonai, we will be blessed, and we have free will. The remainder of the portion sets forth a summary of the laws that are essential, that must be followed to achieve that blessing. This portion makes clear that these laws are intended to set the people of Israel apart as something special. We are told, "You are a holy people to the Lord your God. Out of all the peoples on the face of the earth, Adonai has chosen you to be his treasured possession." The people are warned not to follow the practices of the general population in the lands they are entering as to how those people serve their gods. Those people are engaged in human sacrifice. The point is clear. Don't get sucked into an everyone is doing it complacency. The Jewish people are above all that. Rather, follow these rules to achieve the blessing. And included in this distillation of the essential laws, we find this famous passage. If any of your people, Hebrew men or women, sell themselves to you and serve you 6 years, in the 7th year, you must let them go free. And when you release them, do not send them away empty-handed. Supply them liberally from your flock, your threshing floor, and your winepress. Give to them as the Lord God has blessed you. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. That is why I give you this command today. Ta-Nehisi Coates begins his famous article in The Atlantic, The Case for Reparations, with that very quote. Our portion recognizes that it is not enough to free the slave. Jews were called to make reparations, acknowledging that society benefits mightily from forced free labor and owes those people a debt. That was a revolutionary and aspirational thought in its time, showing God's favor on the freed slaves. Our portion also extends that generosity to all those who are struggling, setting forth the command that debts are to be forgiven every 7 years, and that the needy, the stranger, the orphan, and the widow are to be provided for. So, what would God think of the role of Am Yisrael with respect to systemic racism in the U.S. today? Taken as a whole, this week's Torah portion challenges the Jewish people to do what is right, not what is common or popular. Israel is called to a generosity of spirit and hospitality for those for whom society has oppressed, cast aside, or disregarded, giving a hand to a better future. We may see the aspirational call of these passages. However, we need to acknowledge that to take action today on a 400-year-old societal problem that has been embedded in every system in the U.S. requires that we inform ourselves of the situation. We cannot help remedy a problem without understanding it. My Facing Our Truth small group understood that learning together was one step toward healing the world, or tikkun olam. Our group was enthusiastic, eager to learn, honest, vulnerable, and authentic in sharing our own personal experiences and our pain about the realities of racism. A few comments from our members. The group discussed things, for many of us, we definitely would not have discussed otherwise. It is brilliant to have a structured way to approach the topic of racism, especially the Black experience. My main takeaway was how much I was not even aware of. I kept getting educated and having my eyes more and more opened. It was powerful to be together. Everyone in my group recommended the program to other Beth Am congregants. One of our most impactful sessions for me was a session on Jews of color. We learned that Jews of color are a large and growing segment of the Jewish people here in the United States. There are estimates that 12 to 15% of American Jews are Jews of color, or 1 in 7. And this percentage is probably understated. Jews of color are born to Jewish parents, adopted by Jewish parents, voluntarily convert to Judaism with or without a marriage, and come from the Jewish diaspora around the world. Unfortunately, many Ashkenazi Jews do not embrace these Jews of color. Jews of color report being questioned suspiciously or being asked to take on some service appropriate for staff, often years after becoming active and visible members in their congregations. When they share proudly that they are a member of a congregation, they often hear, "Gee, you don't look Jewish." Jews of color ask, what is a Jewish look? Given the Jewish diaspora around the world, the rising trend of intermarriage, including racial intermarriage here in the United States, and a robust trend of conversions by Jews of choice, they have a point. In fact, a powerful sermon in our curriculum observed that the very construct of a Jewish race, consistent with a Jewish look, has been used by the Jews' enemies and oppressors throughout our history to justify enslavement, expulsion, and genocide. That rabbi asked, why should we use our enemy's construct against our own people? If 12 to 15% of Jews in America are Jews of color, and that percentage is growing, it strikes me that Beth Am has a tremendous opportunity to develop thoughtful ways to welcome Jews of color and all people of color to our campus, our classes, our worship with hospitality and grace. The Facing Our Truth program offers an eye-opening window on systemic racism in the U.S. This is hard stuff, and once we see it, we cannot unsee it. So where can one go next? In response, our small group has agreed to continue studying together. We hope like-minded alumni from the Facing Our Truth program will form a cohort, not only to study and learn, but also to search out opportunities to act for justice and equity. I believe we are all being called to stand up for those who are harmed by systemic racism. We have a wealth of opportunities to make a difference locally and nationally on these issues. We can use our knowledge at the ballot box, in conversations with others, in welcoming the stranger here at Beth Am and in our communities. Everyone in the United States is on a journey about race and racism, whether we know it or not. And I believe it is better to be well equipped for that journey. I hope you will sign up for one of the future Facing Our Truth small groups. And I look forward to talking with you more about this important work. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, and thank you, Diane.